What is RAM CAS latency, and how does it affect PC gaming? Have you ever wondered what makes your gaming experience smooth and responsive? One of the key players in this game is RAM, specifically its CAS latency. So, what exactly is CAS latency? CAS latency stands for Column Address Strobe Latency. It measures the delay, in clock cycles, between when the memory controller requests data from the RAM and when the RAM starts delivering that data. In simpler terms, it tells us how quickly the RAM can respond to requests for information. CAS latency is represented by numbers like CL16 or CL18. The lower the number, the faster the RAM can respond. For instance, if you have RAM with a CAS latency of 16, it takes 16 clock cycles to respond to a request. On the other hand, if the CAS latency is 18, it takes 18 clock cycles. So, lower CAS latency is generally better for performance. However, CAS latency is just one part of the performance puzzle. RAM speed, measured in megahertz, also plays a significant role. For example, RAM running at 3600 MHz with a CAS latency of 18 might perform similarly to RAM at 30 to 100 MHz with a CAS latency of 16. This is because the higher frequency can make up for the longer latency. To get a clearer picture of how these numbers affect performance, you can calculate the true latency in nanoseconds. You do this by dividing the CAS latency by the RAM frequency and multiplying by a constant. This calculation shows how both CAS latency and frequency work together to determine how quickly RAM can deliver data. In the world of PC gaming, CAS latency can impact how quickly your system accesses data in RAM. This can influence game loading times, frame rates, and overall responsiveness. Games that are sensitive to memory speed, especially those that relying heavily on the central processing unit, can benefit from lower CAS latency. However, the difference in gaming performance between RAM kits with slightly different CAS latencies is often subtle. Upgrading components like the graphics processing unit or central processing unit usually makes a more noticeable impact. When choosing RAM for your gaming setup, it is wise to find a balance between CAS latency and frequency. A RAM kit with a good combination, like 30 to 100 MHz with a CAS latency of 16 or 3600 MHz with a CAS latency of 18, typically offers solid gaming performance. Extremely low CAS latency with low frequency or very high frequency with high CAS latency may not provide the best results. To sum it up, CAS latency is the delay in clock cycles before RAM responds to a data request. For PC gaming, lower CAS latency combined with higher RAM frequency can lead to smoother gameplay. However, the overall impact is often modest compared to other hardware components. So, when you are upgrading your gaming rig, keep an eye on both CAS latency and frequency for the best results.